Welcome to the original Yearbook Podcast, brought to you by your local Midwest Yearbook representative, Jamie Silver, proudly representing Herff Jones Yearbooks. Jamie shares his lifelong passions for yearbook and photography to bring you inspiration, how-tos, and timely reminders to support your publication. Please sit back, enjoy, and remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes.
Well, hello everyone. This is Jamie Silver with Herff Jones and Varsity Brands. I'd like to welcome you back to school, welcome you to the 2020 school year. I hope you had a wonderful summer and I hope you're excited to get this year started. Today I'd like to share a couple photos of some summer events that we hosted. Some of you joined us. Those of you who didn't, we'd love to welcome you there next summer. I'd like to introduce you to who makes up the Herff Jones family. I'd like to share some reminders to get you thinking and planning this year's yearbook. And I'm pretty excited to share something new with you that I've been working on this summer, and I'm calling it the Film Challenge. And the idea here is to help you learn some of the very basic photo techniques to help improve your photography in the yearbook if that's something you're interested in. And in general, please look below where I've included basically timestamps, kind of like a table of contents, if you will, for the Yearbook Podcast. So if you need to watch this in pieces or revisit anything, you'll be able to jump to the section that you're interested at the time. So to start things off, I'd like to start with a summer recap of some of the events we've hosted this year over the summer. Like I said, some of you are in these photos, so I hope you don't mind me sharing these, but we had a lot of fun at Yearbook Camp in Lake Forest, Illinois. And this event is all about having all of you join us, students, teachers, yearbook advisors, and learning everything all about yearbook, from layout design to photography, to the software, to designing your cover with one of our artists. And as you can see, we have a lot of fun too with some team building games, and yearbook should be fun. So this was a great event. Again, it's hosted over the summer. It's in Lake Forest, Illinois. You are more than welcome to join us. These are some of the images from this previous year. And if this is something you're interested in, please do let me know because we'd love to welcome you there next summer. Moving on, we had an event in Kansas City. Now, this one was specifically designed for yearbook advisors only. And what this event was in an environment where we had computer labs set up and we talked about everything yearbook, as well as putting everyone on a bus and taking them to the plant down the street. And they got to see behind the scenes and see how books are made and meet all the amazing people on the Herff Jones family that make your books become a reality. So these are just a few photos of those folks who joined us. Again, if you did join us, I hope you had a wonderful time. Here's a photo of us getting off the bus and getting into the plant. For those of you who didn't, I hope you can join us next year. Just let me know, and I'm happy to get you more information on that. But it's really cool to get in the plant, see the library, go through the books, find your book if it was just printed. So this is kind of a first experience to see that. And really just get a whole tour of the plant and see all the amazing folks that really make this happen. So great event. Again, for those of you who joined us, thank you. I hope you had a wonderful time. And for those of you interested, let me know. I'm going to get you some more information. Okay, now I'd like to introduce you to some of the folks who make the Herff Jones family the amazing family that it is. And you should know that you are welcome to call all of us, including myself. But I wanted to share with you some photos so you can kind of put a face with a name. Now, we do have one change, a really exciting change to share with you for this school year. I'm proud to introduce Rudy. And Rudy is relatively new in our customer service department. So for those of you who remember Sarah Eagle is still here. In fact, Sarah is working hand in hand with Rudy. And Rudy's been involved as administrative assistant in the customer service department for a while. So she's actually gotten to know some of your books behind the scenes. So she might already know all about your yearbook. But Rudy she actually sits right next to Sarah. So Sarah is still here. No worries. You can still call Sarah. Rudy is now, for you and I, our assigned customer service person, and she is awesome. For those of you who got to meet her with me this summer at that event that I just shared pictures of, she's amazing. She did yearbook in high school, so she is a fellow Yard. And again, she works alongside with Sarah and everyone else in customer service. So for 2020, she is your dedicated customer service advisor. You'll start to see her name show up. You'll see something in the mail from her shortly to kind of introduce you to herself and some tips for a successful year and some of our other folks in tech support, which we'll talk about in a minute. But again, Rudy is amazing. I encourage you to reach out to her. You'll be hearing from her, and she's here to help you along with everyone else on our team. Now, speaking of the team, I also want to highlight one other person here. Jeremy. And Jeremy Piper is awesome. Jeremy is in our order center. So many of you may have known or have talked with Jeremy in the past because he's been here quite a while. If you have any questions about your online book sales or your online ad sales, Jeremy is the guy to go to. He's who I go to when I don't have an answer to something. So as always, with the Herff Jones team, you are welcome to call me directly as your local rep, but you can also call Jeremy, Rudy, our tech support folks directly anytime you need. We're here as a team to support you. And speaking of that team, many of you probably know some of our tech support folks. Here's a picture of them from this summer. And these are the folks we all rely on heavily when it comes time to technology and troubleshooting and all that. They are amazing. And this is just a photo of some of them, and you're welcome to call them directly anytime as well. When you're logged into eDesign, or if you have a reminder from me from InDesign, you'll have a contact list, and where it says Tech Support Advisors, these are the folks you'll be calling. So I just wanted to share a photo with you so you can start putting a face with a name. So again, in summary, this is part of the Herff Jones team, myself included as your local rep. You are welcome to call any of us, all of us, anytime. We're here to support you. Now, with that said, I'd like to jump into kind of the reminders section of the podcast today. So I know it's tempting to jump right into InDesign and eDesign and start building pages and templates and all that, which some of you might be ready for that, especially if you joined us this summer and you got started. If not, don't feel like you need to. I always like to pause here and remind people that we'll get to that soon. If that feels intimidating as far as learning the software, if it's new to you, or if you're new to Yearbook staff and this is all new to you, I would encourage you not to worry about that stuff just yet. Again, some of you, if you've worked on this summer on your own or with us, then you might be ready to do that, but we will have so much more dedicated time in the next episodes of the podcast, calling us directly anytime. You don't need to wait for the podcast, but we can get to building the pages and nuts and bolts of learning the program later. At this point, what I would encourage you to do, rather than focusing on that, is getting to know your yearbook staff, getting to know everyone at school, reaching out to your photographer, photo company, making sure you have portrait days scheduled, and really focus on planning. Because the fact of the matter is, we can look at how to build a template, but if we don't have pictures to put on it from day one of school, none of that matters. So I always encourage folks this time of year to focus on photos, coverage, and planning the yearbook. Now, unless you're listening and you're at an elementary school using our key program, and that's the same as last year, so no changes there. For everyone else, your cover and your end sheet, as you know, are due by Halloween. Now, for this year, I'd like to offer an incentive to get it done by October 1st, if you can, and I'll help you do so. And I'll be happy to throw a pizza party for your yearbook staff if you're able to submit your cover and your end sheets and all the pieces that go with it, photos, colors, and all that, whatever might go into it. By the 1st of October, I will throw a little pizza party for you guys on staff. Now, moving on. Another thing to really focus on, and that's why I introduced Jeremy on the screen here, is your online yearbook sales or in-school sales. Basically, anything related to your yearbook sales, please let us help you if you'd like. To whatever degree you want us to help you, we're here for you. So whether it's planning your online book sales or your online ad sales, please let me and Jeremy give you a hand and answer any questions you might have. Now, as far as what to do next, that's a common question I get. Again, I wouldn't worry about the software too much. We'll cover this in the future. But what I would say also is a good thing to focus on is reviewing last year's yearbook. Look at it and see, what did you like? What didn't you like? What do you want to change? Find inspiration. Again, some of you came to camp and you found some inspiration as far as design. Another really great place for inspiration is Barnes & Noble. Another one is college brochures. If you're looking for design, those college brochures and magazines at Barnes & Noble are an awesome place to see what's current and what's trending, and we can help you translate that into a yearbook design for your pages or cover. Another thing to make sure you look at is planning the ladder. Staff organization, and of course theme development for the year. So that all falls under that category of planning and not worrying too much about the nuts and bolts of the software just yet. You do want to look at the school schedule and plan to make sure you have coverage of all the events happening from day one. So making sure you have a photographer out there to make sure you get pictures of all the events that are happening so we can make sure we get that stuff covered in the yearbook. Now, With that said, please feel free to contact me directly anytime. We don't need to wait until we meet at school or wait for the next podcast. These are all things that are just available to you on demand. But we can also work together before we even meet. We can talk over the phone, email. We can do a virtual meeting. Please see the link below in the notes to see how that works. We can do that much more quickly and in multiple locations. So if, say, some of you are at school and some of you are off site, we can all be together in this virtual environment. That's something I host. I'm happy to do that anytime. And then, of course, you have me and the Herff Jones team that I've introduced you to assist you anytime. So please don't hesitate to call us. That's why we're here, and we love our job. You are never bothering us. So please feel free to call or email anytime. And now I'm excited to kick off something new that I've been working on this summer for you. It's called the Film Challenge for the 2020 school year. My goal here is to share my passion for photography. Photography is how I got involved in Yearbook a long time ago, and I'm excited to share that with you here today. I want to teach you the basics at the heart of photography. If photography is one of those topics where you'd like to learn a little bit more or improve just a little bit in the yearbook, this is going to help you out. And we're going to have some fun along the way with some simple contests and awards, so please stay tuned for that. It is about a 15-minute lesson on what I'm calling Photo 101 for Yearbook, and I invite you to join us and participate. Now, it is called the Film Challenge, and I'll explain more in a little bit here. And if you have access to a film camera, I encourage you to do so. It's a lot of fun to see the mechanics. I feel, as I'll explain here in a minute, it's much easier to learn the basics on a good old-fashioned 35mm camera versus some of the more complex modern digital cameras. But either way, because I realize not everyone has access to a film camera, desire to do it, or time involved in processing it or sending it out. So you don't feel like you need to use film to do this, but I'm going to illustrate here on the screen with a film camera because I think it helps clarify some basic points. Welcome to the Film Challenge, or Photo 101 for Yearbook. I want to assist you in capturing images like these for your yearbook, no matter what equipment you have. This is not a photography class replacement, but rather geared to helping everyone on your yearbook staff take better photos by understanding the few basics. If you have an opportunity to take a photo class, I highly recommend it. So I grew up in the studio environment because my dad is a commercial photographer. Back then, I learned the basics of photography, including the darkroom and film processing with printmaking the old-fashioned way. And as a result, I got involved in yearbook in middle school and high school as a student photographer. To this day, photojournalism is one of my passions, and one reason I love working with you to publish your yearbook. My goal is to share that passion and have some fun together with us. The challenge is to learn the basics with a good old-fashioned 35mm camera. Please note, if you have access, time, and interest in using a film camera, please do. It's very rewarding to see the mechanics of it all. Otherwise, a modern DSLR or digital camera will work too. We may do an iPhone challenge or smartphone challenge later, but for this first round, it's important to use a camera that you can control and learn the basic settings, and those are shutter and aperture. Another note, film cameras are dirt cheap right now. Some great camera bodies and professional level camera bodies can be purchased for only $100 or $200. If this is something you're interested in, please let me know, and I'll be happy to share more. I've had some success buying some old film cameras on eBay. Today, we'll go over the basics and then include a challenge at the end, a photo assignment for you to do and share back with me via email. At the end of the month, an award will be given to the best image. I'd like to start by highlighting the 3 things that all cameras have in common. Aperture, how much light is let in. Shutter speed, how long the light is let in. And third, its recording ability and how quickly it can do so, measured on a scale generally from 100 to 6400 ISO, or sometimes known as ASA. This is a result of the speed of the film, or in modern times, the speed in which the sensor can record the light coming in. Okay, so to help illustrate, what we're going to do is we're going to grab an old-fashioned 35mm camera, and this one here is actually what I used in high school when I was on Yearbook. So I've taken a lot of photos with this old camera here, but the reason I picked it today is it's mechanical and it's very simple to see the basic operations. So what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about aperture. And the aperture is the ring on the lens barrel right here that lets you control how much light is let in. And it's measured in f-stops, right? So from f1.8 on this lens to f22. And to illustrate what that means, we're going to open this camera up. Clearly, we wouldn't really do this if we had a roll of film in here, for example, because in doing this, we're able to see, what the film would be recording, or in a modern camera, what the digital sensor is recording right here. So we're going to look through the camera and see what it sees, and we're going to do so in a very slow way so we can actually witness what's happening, because it works really quickly otherwise. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at f22, and we're going to open the shutter so we can see through it. And you see f22 is a very small opening, and as we open it up, it opens up to, in this case again, 1.8, allowing more light in. Think of that as maybe an analogy of a garden hose. Let's do that again real quick. So here's a fire hose, if you will, wide open, f1.8. Here is that small tiny garden hose letting very little light, or very water in this analogy, through. Okay, so that's the f-stop. That is the opening in the lens, and that again tells the camera how much light to let in, with a small opening or a large opening to let more light in. Okay, now the amount of time that shutter is open, as you see it just closed, is the shutter speed. And to illustrate that, we're going to close this down to 1 second, and you'll see the difference. Okay, so it's open 1 second. Now we're going to try this at a 30th of a second. Okay, you can barely see it move. Now that's 1/30th. Now you won't be able to see this, but we're going to show it anyway. This is 1,000th of a second. Can't even see that thing move, but it is moving. Again, we'll slow it down. We're going to do 2 seconds to illustrate. Okay, there's the lens opening. And it was open for 2 seconds, allowing light to be in. So think of this as an analogy with the garden hose and the fire hose as the valve. This is how long we're leaving that water on, or how long, in this case, we're letting the light in. Now the last piece of the puzzle is the film that's rolling across here and re-rolling over there, or the digital camera sensor, and that's how sensitive it is to recording that light that we're controlling as it comes in, okay? And that's measured in that ISO or ASA number that we talked about. And here's some film examples here, T-Max 100, Kodak 200. Those are pretty slow films, but they're fine for outdoors. So that's how fast it can record, and that's very important. So between those three things, again, aperture on the front, shutter speed right here, and the type of film or whatever you're recording it on, those are the basic functions of the camera. And when I say basic functions, I mean any camera, whether it's a film camera like this or a modern DSLR digital camera, whatever those are, those three things still remain the same. The aperture, how much light is let in at a given time with the f-stop reading, the shutter speed, how long it's let in, and third, how well it can record that on either film or a digital camera. Now, all things being normal to start, because there's always unique lighting situations that we can get into another time, but all things being equal, what you want to do is pick an aperture number, and for reasons I'll explain in a minute, and have the camera simply pick the appropriate shutter speed to allow the correct amount of light in. Now, that's referred to as aperture priority mode on any camera. On Nikons, it's listed as an A on the dial. On Canons, it's listed as an AV, or aperture value. Now, I'd like to pause for a second here and talk a little bit about modern cameras, and another reason why I suggested we start with a film camera like this to learn on, because the dials are simple and simple to learn. On modern cameras can often have that dial including a little icon of mountains, flowers, a swimmer, or other sports icons that represent something. But I find if you're learning something from scratch, sometimes those just get confusing, and they certainly get in the way of learning the basics. So that's why we want to talk about aperture priority, because if you can understand that lens opening and what it does, we're going to talk about that in a second, then let the camera pick the shutter speed and you're good to go, and all you have to do is change one dial. So now let's talk about what these settings actually mean and what they do, because it's a give and take as you make the changes for a different aperture opening. It's not good or bad, but different results. So first, aperture settings are indicated by that f-stop number that we looked at earlier on that old camera, typically from about 2.8 to 22. But in some special lenses, it can be larger or smaller. But just remember that f-stop number is how we measure the aperture. 2.8 to f22 is a common example. Now, the smaller the f-stop number, in our example here, f2.8, will result in the larger or the largest opening of the lens and its ability to collect more light in a given period of time. Now, the larger f-stop number in the opposite, for example, f22, represents that smaller opening on the lens and its ability to collect less light over the same period of time. Just remember, this is inverted. The smaller number is the larger opening, and the larger number is the smaller opening. Okay, so with all that said, we got the mechanics of it. Now let's see what it can actually do for us with our images. So with understanding we're talking about normal lighting conditions, again, you want to pick the aperture and the camera will pick the matched shutter speed to go with it. So in these examples, we're talking about a lens that's being able to be open or wide open. So like f2.8, for example, or the smallest number you can achieve with your lens, which will yield a couple things. It's going to yield a faster shutter speed, so to freeze your action, right? Sports and all that at school. So when we need to freeze action, again, f2.8 or smaller, basically the smallest number you can get on your lens. Now, another thing it also yields is a shallow depth of field. This is one of my favorite looks in photography. This is where we isolate a subject, meaning your primary subject is sharp and in focus, but everything else in front and in back starts to go blurry and then very blurry. That's by design. That is achieved by that f2.8 or that fast lens or wide open lens. Now, in the other extreme example, we're going to look at these images, which were shot at a lens that was closed down. So for example, f22, that garden hose analogy we looked at when we looked at the camera. This is where we close the lens down and have it squint more so it allows less light in, right? And in doing so, it will give a slower shutter speed to make up for that. But again, that really doesn't matter sometimes, especially in group photos or whatnot like that. And the result is it gives you a greater depth of field, so more is in focus. This is really important, for example, in club photos or any environment where you have multiple people that are further back from the camera or closer to the camera. Because again, back to our analogy earlier in the examples I showed where the lens was wide open, it has, everything is frozen in action and it gives you very shallow depth of field, meaning one thing's in focus and everything else goes blurry. Think about that for like a club photo. That's terrible. Or a team photo where you got rows and rows of students. You don't want the first row in focus, and then as you go further back, they all get blurry, right? So you actually want to do the opposite. You want to close the lens down to a larger number. Again, f22, remember it's inverted. Not all the way to f22 necessarily, but you want to close it down as much as you can and gain that depth of field so more things are in focus. Now, to help illustrate that difference in the f-stop and the results that it yields as far as the depth of field, I wanted to show you these two examples on screen. This first one is shot wide open, right? So one thing is in focus. So I focused on the word Nikon on the front of this old camera, and it's sharp, right? And you can see as you look forward, the front of that lens gets blurry, and as you start again at the word Nikon and look back, the dials are blurry, and the camera behind it, you can't even tell it's a camera, it's totally blurry. Again, that's the result of a wide open lens, like f1.8 as we've been talking about examples. Now closing that down to say f22 or beyond, and this is an extreme example because it's a still life, so it's easier, there's no motion, but I want to illustrate as we close it down. Now look at that. Not only is the word Nikon originally where I focused on the old camera there in focus, now you can actually read the front of the lens. If you look forward, and you can see where it says 1.8 and all the numbers, the serial number on the front of the lens, but also the dials on that camera, and then look at that. There's a whole other camera behind it, and it's more or less in focus. Not quite as sharp, but it is. Again, the difference is between wide open here, one thing is in focus. That's what you want to remember when we talk about a wide open aperture. Remember that smaller number, f1.8 for example, or whatever your camera does. Wide open will result in one thing in focus, so I focused on that word Nikon, and then closing that lens down to, again, it's inverted, so that larger number, f22 in these examples we've been giving, allows more things to be in focus. Again, my goal here is not to replace a photography class, but rather give you just some of the basic concepts that will have a positive impact on your photography for Yearbook right away. Today we really just covered two very basic functions, aperture and shutter speed. And those two things, which will help you freeze action when needed and have the right elements, that depth of field we talked about, have the right elements in your image in focus. Okay, so the September challenge is to capture an environmental portrait of a fellow yearbook staffer or your yearbook advisor if they're willing, and do so in front of a window for light because we want to avoid using flash, just another dynamic. We're just trying to focus on some basics right now. And you want to do two versions of that. One version with a shallow depth of field, okay, so we'll open that lens all the way up, and then one with a greater depth of field. So look at the sample on screen here and kind of play with where you position your subject and where you move with your camera to maximize that depth, to really illustrate that depth of field. Now, one tip is be cautious with that second one where we're increasing that depth of field while we're closing the lens down. As a result, your shutter speed will be longer, right, to allow more light in. You don't want that to drop, say, below 2/50th of a second or so, because as the shutter speed gets slower, there's a chance for some more blurry images, right, because it's open longer, so if you or your subject moves, you might have blur. Now, when you're done with this, please email both of your samples of this portrait to me by September 20th. And on a side note, if you do decide to use film like I am, just for fun or to learn the basics, if you're processing it at school, say you have a photo lab or a class, awesome, you can do it real quick. If you need to mail it away like I do, I'm happy to share examples of where to send that and costs involved in turnaround time, but generally speaking, you want to allow like 12 days for that because it does just take time to mail it and whatnot. So consider that. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you have some fun with this very basic challenge. We'll move on to other subjects later, whoever's interested. But if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Yearbook Podcast. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button, and as always, feel free to reach out to Jamie and his team anytime. Jamie can be reached directly at 920-965-6262 or 847-561-8525 or at jesilver@herffjones.com.